Right now, as you lie in the deepening stillness of your room, there is a very specific, low-grade buzzing sensation vibrating behind your temples. It is a quiet electrical hum of exhaustion, a subtle frequency of survival that has been running in the background of your mind for hours, perhaps even for months. You might feel a stubborn, protective tightness gripping the center of your chest, or a subtle bracing in your stomach, as if your physical body is still standing guard against an invisible threat that never quite arrives, yet never quite leaves. Even though the day is fully over, and your environment is entirely safe, your nervous system is still carrying a heavy layer of invisible armor. You are awake in the dark because your spirit has been wound so tightly for so long that it has forgotten how to let go of the tension. You have trained yourself to constantly anticipate the next sudden shift in life, treating stillness as a vulnerability you cannot afford, and looking at the world through the exhausted eyes of a sentry who dares not sleep. Let yourself sink a fraction deeper into the quiet, welcoming support of your mattress, allowing the bed to take over the heavy task of holding your weight. The room around you is softly dimming now, the frantic, loud demands of the daylight hours dissolving into the quiet corners of the night. Feel the gentle, reassuring weight of your blanket as it settles across your body, creating a soft, protective boundary between your heart and the endless noise of the world outside. Through the window, a pale, quiet sliver of autumn moonlight catches the edge of the floorboards, completely unmoving, asking nothing from the dark space it illuminates. The distant sounds of the evening are beginning to grow faint, turning into a low, harmless murmur that gradually drifts away into the background. As you rest your head against the pillow, notice the cool night air as it brushes against your skin, carrying away the lingering friction of everything you had to manage today. With each slow, natural breath, invite your frame to soften, letting go of the need to maintain a perfect, vigilant stance in the dark. Dear friend, right now, please let these words settle deeply into your mind. You are not broken. What you are feeling tonight is not a failure of your strength, nor is it a sign that you are fundamentally flawed. This constant state of hyper-vigilance, this automatic habit of bracing your physical body against the environment, is not a mistake. It is a highly intelligent, deeply protective strategy that your mind constructed when the world felt too volatile to trust. It was born from a beautiful desire to keep yourself safe. But tonight, we are not going to force your mind to become perfectly silent, and we are not going to demand that you violently tear down your defenses before you are ready. Fighting your own anxiety only creates a harder wall. Tonight, you do not have to solve your whole life, and you do not have to figure out how to navigate tomorrow before the sun rises. You are safe enough right now to soften, to let your guard drop, and to remember that absolutely nothing is required of you in this quiet room. We often believe that our constant worry and physical bracing are what keep our lives from falling apart, a necessary vigilance that protects us from being caught off guard. But this continuous internal tension holds a profound, exhausting paradox. The mind does not find safety because you brace your body against the world it finds safety, when you realize that the armor you wear is what is keeping you exhausted. Hypervigilance is not proof that you are prepared for life. It is fear pretending to protect you by stretching your spirit until it breaks. It is like an ancient weaving loom carved from dark timber, where a fine, beautiful silk warp has been drawn so fiercely across the wooden frame that it is held at a constant breaking strain. Because the weaver is terrified that any slight slackness will ruin the cloth, they tighten the bone pegs further and further, until the slightest vibration in the room causes the entire thread to hum with a high, agonizing, brittle pitch. The thread remains frozen in a state of perpetual tension, unable to move, unable to yield, vibrating with a high-frequency strain that robs the silk of its natural resilience. Have you felt this stretched loom thread inside your own temples tonight? Have you been moving through your days with your mind pulled so taut against the future that your body is constantly humming with the friction of an anticipated crisis? We spend our precious energy tightening the pegs of our internal frames, believing that a brittle, rigid state of readiness will shield us from the unpredictability of living, only to find that the tension itself is what is fracturing our peace from within. If it feels right, take a slow, unhurried breath in through your nose, simply noticing the cool, crisp quality of the air as it travels down to expand the tight spaces around your ribs. And when you are ready, let that breath slip away through your lips with a long, soft, unrestricted sigh, letting your abdomen drop and your shoulders loosen into the mattress. There is no need to force your breathing to match an artificial pace. Just watch your body breathe itself in the dark. You do not need to perform readiness tonight. You do not have to earn your right to be still by securing the future before the morning comes. You are safe enough right now to simply be a tired human being who has held a high-frequency strain for a very long distance. One of the great, liberating insights of the Buddha was the understanding that true peace is not found by forcing the outside world to become completely certain, but by changing our internal relationship with difficulty. The Buddha pointed out that our experience is made of two entirely different layers, and that our suffering grows when the mind adds judgment and resistance to the natural changes of life. The sudden shifts in our environments, the unexpected winds that disrupt our plans, and the simple reality that life is constantly changing. This is the first pain of living. It is a natural condition of existence, fluid and temporary. But when we believe we must control every outcome to be safe, when we harden our bodies into a rigid armor to resist the unknown, we are striking ourselves with a second arrow. The continuous buzzing behind your eyes, the tight cage around your lungs, the profound exhaustion that leaves you wide awake at midnight. This is the second wound. We inflict it upon ourselves every time we over-tighten the pegs of our internal looms, forgetting that our soul was meant to be flexible and spacious, not a rigid wire snapping under the weight of its own protection. In a moment, this story will show us something even quieter about the nature of this hidden strain. We will journey high up a windswept mountain pass during a chilly autumn twilight, where an old, blind master weaver showed a very tired young student exactly what happens when we try to protect our beauty by stretching it past its threshold. But before we climb that rocky mountain path, let your jaw loosen slightly. Separate your teeth, release small muscles around your eyes, and allow your head to sink fully into the pillow, letting go of the struggle as we begin to listen. High upon a desolate, rocky pass where the northern peaks split the sky like jagged teeth, the wind never truly fell silent. It swept across the grey stone ridges in long, icy gusts, carrying the scent of early snow and dry pine needles. Nestled into a shallow hollow of the rock, just beneath the crest of the pass, stood a small, solitary workshop built of weathered cedar timbers. The wood had turned the color of ash from decades of exposure to the mountain storms. Inside this workshop, away from the bitter cold of the autumn twilight, lived Master Juro. He was an old weaver who had lost his sight many winters ago, yet his hands possessed a rare, uncanny wisdom. He could navigate the complex grid of a loom purely by the texture of the fiber beneath his fingertips, and he could diagnose the health of a piece of cloth simply by listening to the sound the threads made as the wooden shuttle glided between them. To this isolated mountain workshop came Kai, a young man who had spent his youth running a small weaving business in the crowded valley markets below. Kai was exceptionally talented, but his inner world was a continuous, exhausting battlefield of anxiety. He lived in constant terror of ruin, fearful that a sudden shift in the market would leave him destitute, anxious that a single flawed knot would destroy his reputation, and permanently braced for some unspecified catastrophe that he believed was always lurking just around the corner. To protect himself and his livelihood, Kai had adopted a habit of absolute control. He supervised every minute detail with a fierce, unforgiving intensity. He worked past midnight, slept with his fists clenched, and kept his mind perpetually wound tight, believing that his hypervigilance was the only shield standing between his life and total chaos. When Kai pushed open the heavy cedar door of the mountain workshop, the cold twilight air followed him inside, swirling the dust motes in the dim, amber light of a single tallow candle. Kai was trembling, his shoulders hoisted high and stiff beneath his wool cloak, his jaw locked tight against the chattering of his teeth. He had climbed the mountain pass, not to seek spiritual enlightenment, but because his work had ground to a terrible halt. For the past 3 months, every time he attempted to weave his finest silk on his own loom, the threads would mysteriously snap. No matter how carefully he selected the fiber, or how softly he threw the shuttle, the warp would split with a sharp, sickening pop, leaving his work in ruined, tangled nests. Master Juro was sitting quietly on a low straw mat beside a massive dark timber weaving frame that occupied the center of the room. The old man did not turn his head when the door creaked open. He remained perfectly still, his wrinkled hands resting lightly on the frame, his ears tilting slightly to interpret the heavy, ragged sound of Kai's shallow breathing. "Sit down by the hearth, young traveler," Juro said, his voice low and weathered, matching the dry rustle of the wind outside. "The mountain path is steep, but the path you are running inside your own mind is far more exhausting." Kai did not sit. He stepped closer to the large loom, his eyes wide and restless, his fingers twitching against his sleeves. "Master Juro, I have come because my looms have turned against me," Kai said, his voice thin and vibrating with frustration. "I use the strongest silk in the province. I inspect every thread under the lamp. I prepare for every failure, yet the moment I begin to weave, the silk breaks. My hands are raw from retying the knots, and my head feels as though it is trapped in a swarm of bees. Why does my work shatter when I am doing everything in my power to keep it secure?" Master Juro stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He reached out a hand, his long, sensitive fingers brushing lightly along the dark timber uprights of the loom until he found a row of small, white bone pegs driven into the top beam. These pegs held the vertical warp threads in place. The old man placed his palm against the taut, shimmering web of silk that stretched down the frame. "In a moment, this story will show us something even quieter about the hidden cost of a mind that cannot bear to let go of its guard." "Bring your candle closer, Kai," the master commanded softly, "and touch the central thread of this warp." Kai stepped forward, lifting the small tallow candle. In the yellow light, he saw that the silk threads on Juro's loom were pulled incredibly tight, so tight they looked like solid rods of glass rather than soft fibers. Kai reached out a trembling index finger and pressed against the center thread. It did not yield, it did not bow or flex beneath his touch even a fraction of an inch. Instead, the moment his skin brushed the silk, the entire wooden frame of the loom let out a high, thin, agonizing hum that echoed sharply through the quiet workshop. It was a brittle, shrill sound, vibrating with a desperate, unnatural strain that made Kai's own teeth ache. Master Juro nodded his head toward the sound. "Do you hear that pitch, Kai? That is the sound of a frame that is terrified of the wind. You came up the mountain path, believing that your threads are breaking because they are weak, or because you have not watched them closely enough. But look at what your fear has actually done. You have tightened these bone pegs so fiercely, out of a desire to prevent any mistake, that you have stripped the silk of its true nature. You have driven the wood to a breaking strain, forcing the warp to live in a state of permanent defensive armor." The old weaver reached up his hand, his calloused thumb settling onto the first bone peg. He did not issue a grand lecture. He simply gave the peg a slow, gentle turn, loosening it by a mere fraction of an inch. With a soft wooden click, the peg yielded. Instantly, the shrill, piercing vibration in the room dropped. The central silk thread relaxed slightly, losing its brittle, glassy stiffness and taking on a soft, natural curve that caught the candlelight with a deep, satin gleam. "Pluck the thread now, Kai," Juro whispered. Kai reached out his finger again and tapped the silk. This time, the thread did not hum with an agonizing strain. It yielded softly to his touch, bowing under the pressure of his skin, and then rebounded effortlessly back to its place with a low, deep, resonant note that sounded like an ancient temple bell heard from across a quiet valley. The sound was warm, spacious, and entirely at peace. A willow branch survives the weight of the autumn snow, not because it is rigid like iron, but because it knows how to bow until the snow slides off its leaves, Master Juro said. His sightless eyes turned toward the dark window where the wind was howling against the cedar planks. "Your hypervigilance is not an act of wisdom, young weaver. It is an act of resistance. You are so terrified of the unpredictable movements of life that you are trying to freeze your threads into steel bars before you will trust them. But a thread that cannot yield is already broken. It is merely waiting for the first touch of the shuttle to reveal its fracture." Kai stood perfectly frozen in the center of the dim workshop. A sudden, sharp throb of recognition flared behind his eyes, the exact buzzing sensation that had been torturing his temples for months. He looked down at his own chest, and he realized that he had been treating his entire life exactly like that over-tightened warp. He had turned his body into a rigid wooden frame, pulling his thoughts so taut against the future that the slightest unexpected sound or passing worry caused his whole nervous system to hum with a brittle, exhausting strain. He was standing in a safe workshop, protected from the storm by thick cedar walls, yet his muscles were still locked in a desperate, defensive stance, waiting for a ruin that his own mind was continuously creating. Master Juro walked back to his straw mat and sat down, closing his eyes to the darkness. He did not tell Kai how to fix his business, nor did he demand that he change his personality tomorrow. He simply picked up a wooden shuttle and held it loosely in his lap, letting the low, rich resonance of the loosened silk thread settle into the quiet air of the room. "Leave your loom unstrung for the night, Kai," the old man murmured as the candle began to gutter in the draught. "Your spirit has been vibrating at a breaking pitch for too long. Let the mountain teach you that the earth does not fall apart just because you choose to let the pegs go slack for an hour. Let the image of that dark timber loom sink deeply into your own awareness for a moment, letting the sound of that high, brittle hum dissolve into the quiet space of your bedroom. Feel how much energy you have spent today tightening the pegs of your own internal frame, trying to mentally secure tomorrow, trying to prevent any discomfort and bracing your muscles against the unknown. There is no need to restring your loom tonight. You can allow the threads of your mind to go completely slack, letting the tension drop away into the darkness beneath you as we rest. This story is not telling us to stop feeling, nor is it asking us to become cold, numb, or detached like the frost-bitten stone slabs that form the mountain pass outside. It is not an invitation to turn away from your life, to abandon your creative labor, or to meet the world with a flat, cynical indifference. Buddhist wisdom does not wish to transform your sensitive, perceptive spirit into an unyielding wall where nothing can touch you. Instead, it is pointing us towards something much quieter, a profound and elegant way of being alive that does not require you to wear down your own nervous system in a desperate attempt to protect your peace. When we look closely at Kai's exhaustion inside that mountain workshop, we begin to see that his true suffering did not live in the simple fact that the wind was howling or that the future of his trade was uncertain. The wind is simply the wind. It is a natural shifting condition of the high country. The real, crushing suffering began the exact moment his own mind decided that the uncertainty of tomorrow was an emergency he was personally obligated to conquer through continuous vigilance. It was the internal, frantic grip within his own thoughts that insisted he must stretch his spirit until it was rigid, believing that if he left any part of his life loose or unmapped, he would be completely ruined. In our own lives, we often fall into this exact same trap without ever realizing the immense toll it takes on our bodies. We mistake the exhausting strain of hypervigilance for authentic preparation. We tell ourselves that because we are intelligent, responsible, and caring, we must mentally rehearse every failure, anticipate every conflict, and brace ourselves for the next sudden shift in our environment. When an unexpected change occurs, or when we sense a subtle drop in the emotional temperature of a room, our chest tightens instantly. The mind panics and immediately begins to tighten the internal pegs, spinning complex webs of worry to ensure we are never caught off guard. We believe that a brittle, defensive state of readiness will protect us from the volatility of living, forgetting that the tension itself is what is fracturing our peace from within. One of the great, liberating insights of the Buddha was the translation of this desperate gripping into a clear understanding of how we create our own inner bondage. In traditional teachings, this pattern is recognized as a profound attachment to certainty, a deep craving for an absolute guarantee that says, unless everything is perfectly secured and predictable, I am not safe enough to soften. We become addicted to the habit of bracing, using our attention not to appreciate the present moment, but as a radar system to scan for impending danger. We treat every passing wave of uncertainty as a threat to our existence, forgetting that life is naturally fluid, changing, and beyond our total management. When we explain this through the language of our emotions, mindfulness simply becomes the sacred ability to see an anxious thought or a physical tightening rise in your body without immediately over-tightening your frame to fight it. It is the capacity to notice the high-frequency buzzing behind your temples, to feel the cold draft of an uncertain tomorrow. I see this worry, but I do not have to become this worry. Awareness is the vast, quiet space that can observe a thread vibrating at a breaking pitch without believing that your entire soul has been broken. It allows you to see that fear is an event passing through you, not a permanent definition of who you are. Slowly, the teaching becomes personal. Think of how this invisible mechanism is operating within your own frame right now, as you lie in the quiet darkness of this room. How many internal pegs have you tightened tonight in an attempt to secure tomorrow? What conversations from today are you still replaying, trying to iron out every wrinkle, or what upcoming tasks are you already fiercely rehearsing in your mind? Notice how your body continues to hold its ground, your muscles slightly coiled, your breath shallow, as if you are still standing on that windswept pass, defending yourself against a storm that has already moved on. Notice that the room around you is completely silent and safe, yet your mind is still vibrating with the friction of a crisis that lives only in your thoughts. Buddhist wisdom reminds us of the beautiful truth of impermanence, the understanding that every human experience, every difficult season, and every wave of anxiety is a passing condition that has a natural cycle of rising, peaking, and dissolving back into the quiet space from which it came. The changes in your life are like the wind moving across Master Juro's cedar timbers. They are temporary. When you try to force your mind into a steel bar to resist these changes, you are not protecting yourself. You are simply stripping your spirit of its natural resilience and ease. You are treating a passing breeze as a permanent catastrophe, forcing your warp threads to live at a breaking strain until they have no choice but to snap. The Buddha illuminated this truth by showing us that we constantly add a second wound to the first. The first pain is simply what life brings to our door, the reality that the future cannot be fully controlled that plans will alter, that people will change their minds, and that we will encounter moments of profound uncertainty. That is an inescapable part of being a soft, living creature in a vast universe. We cannot always prevent the first pain, we cannot force the mountain pass to be perfectly warm and still. But the second pain is the massive, exhausting layer of resistance we construct when our own mind insists that we must never be vulnerable, and that we must fix our entire life through chronic worry. The continuous buzzing behind your eyes, the tight armor around your lungs, the profound depletion that leaves you wide awake at midnight. This is the second wound. We inflict it upon ourselves every time we turn the pegs of our internal looms tighter, believing that stress is the price we must pay for safety. But the mind does not become peaceful because you successfully outmaneuver every storm. It becomes peaceful when you change your relationship with the storm itself. It is the capacity to sit completely still within your own skin, knowing that the wind is loud and the path is unmapped, while allowing your threads to go soft, loose, and completely unstrung in the dark. In a moment, this wisdom will come even closer to the physical sensations currently resting in your own body. We will move into a quiet internal practice, where we can begin to experience this freedom firsthand, learning how to gently let the pegs go slack without any pressure to become perfectly healed overnight. But as we prepare to enter that quiet space, let yourself absorb the soft reassurance that you do not have to be on guard tonight. The world can turn without your constant surveillance. You are safe enough right now to let the frame relax, allowing the high-pitched hum of the day to drop away into the deep, quiet resonance of the night. If it feels right to you in this quiet moment, let your awareness slide gently away from the world of concepts and definitions, shifting downward into the immediate physical reality of your body as it rests here in the dark. There is absolutely no need to sit up or alter your posture in any way. You do not need to assume a rigid stance of formal meditation to touch a state of genuine peace. Whether you are lying flat upon your back or curled softly onto your side, your body is already occupying its own perfect space. If it feels comfortable, you might try placing one palm flat against the center of your chest, right over the sternum, or perhaps allowing your hands to rest loosely at your sides, fingers uncurled and heavy against the sheets. Nothing is being demanded of you right now. No one is monitoring your progress, and there is no standard of deep relaxation that you are required to achieve before the morning comes. Even if your mind is still producing a rapid, restless current of thoughts, simply being aware of that movement without judging yourself, for it is already a profound act of wisdom. Take a slow, unhurried breath in through your nose, simply noticing the cool, clean quality of the night air as it filters down to expand the hidden spaces behind your ribs. And when you are ready, let that breath slip out through your lips with a long, soft, unrestricted sigh, letting your abdomen drop and your chest settle into the bed. There is no need to count the seconds or force your lungs to mimic an artificial rhythm. Let your body breathe itself at its own natural pace. Observe how the breath functions as a quiet, steady tide that knows exactly how to flow and ebb without a single conscious command from your intellect. For just this evening, you have permission to resign from your post as the absolute manager of your life. You can step down from the exhausting labor of guarding your survival and allow the heavy, dependable surface beneath you to take over the work of holding your weight. Perhaps you can bring your attention to the tiny, intricate muscles that sit around the corners of your eyes and across the surface of your forehead. If you feel a lingering warmth or a tight knot of concentration there, the physical residue of a day spent analyzing, planning, and anticipating, imagine a cool, soft shadow gently passing over your face, soothing the skin and smoothing out the fine lines of strain. Let that wave of ease travel downward into your jaw, So many of our hidden anxieties and our historical habits of self-protection find a physical home in the way we clench our teeth when we are trying to appear capable to the world. If it feels right, let your teeth separate by just a tiny, weightless space. Allow your tongue to drop away from the roof of your mouth, and let your lower jaw hang loose and completely unhinged. Notice how that single pocket of physical softening instantly radiates a deep sense of release down the sides of your neck and into the tops of your shoulders. As you lie here in the dim, protective cradle of the night, allow your awareness to notice just one specific thought, a particular memory, or a recurring worry that has been repeatedly asking for your attention today. You do not need to go searching for the absolute, deepest or most painful wound in your history. Simply look at whatever quiet shadow is currently hovering at the very surface of your mind. It might be an upcoming responsibility that feels overwhelming, a perceived mistake from earlier this afternoon, or a heavy, nameless anxiety about a future transition. Do not try to push this thought away. Do not try to fix it, and do not criticize yourself for carrying it into the dark. We are not here to fight your mind's protective armor. We are simply here to observe it with a soft, spacious curiosity. In the quiet theater of your imagination, look at this specific worry through the lens of our master weaver's loom. See it not as a permanent failure of your character, but as a fine, delicate silk thread drawn so fiercely across a dark timber frame that it has been pulled to its absolute limit. Notice the bone pegs at the top of the frame, twisted tightly by your own hands out of a desperate desire to keep your life from unraveling. Sense the high-pitched, brittle vibration that this worry creates within your body, that tight, electrical hum behind your temples that makes your breath shallow and your chest tense. For years, your mind has believed that keeping this thread at a breaking strain was the only way to stay safe, mistaking an agonizing, rigid tension for genuine preparedness. Without any rush, and without forcing any sudden emotional breakthrough, imagine your internal awareness gently reaching up to touch that white bone peg. You are not trying to snap the thread, and you are not trying to destroy the loom of your life. You are simply choosing to give that peg a slow, mindful turn, letting it go slack by just a fraction of an inch. With a soft, invisible click, the rigid grip of the wood yields. Watch how the image changes as the tension leaves the silk. The thread loses its brittle, glassy stiffness, softening into a loose, comfortable curve that sways gently with the movement of the night breeze. The shrill, piercing pitch that was buzzing in the background of your mind drops instantly, dissolving into a low, rich, resonant tone that leaves the surrounding air wide and entirely spacious. In a moment, our journey will take us higher into the hidden sanctuaries of the mountain forest, away from the dry cedar workshop, to see how our inner softness is tested when a sudden downpour moves through the valley. But right now, there is absolutely nothing you need to accelerate or complete. True transformation is not a violent storm that tears the fabric apart. It is a quiet, patient loosening of the pegs, a gentle willingness to let your thoughts go slack without calling it a defeat. You can return to this soft space whenever you are ready, knowing that even noticing the tightness is enough to begin the unwinding. Your hands are empty, your chest is wider, and you do not have to solve a single problem before you allow your body to sink into the deep, unstringed quiet of the evening. The quiet lessons of the mountain loom remained with Kai like the faint fragrance of dry cedar wood, but the deeper test of his internal tension was waiting just beyond the misty ridge, where the stillness of Master Juro's workshop ended and the unpredictable world began again. After weeks of practicing how to turn the white bone pegs of his mind, Kai journeyed down into a deeper part of the high country, arriving at a silent monastery nestled beside a dark pine grove. The autumn air had grown intensely cold, and by midnight a massive, unyielding mountain downpour broke over the valley. The rain did not fall in soft, mist-like sheets. It came down in heavy, punishing torrents, flooding the dirt paths, shaking the heavy slate roof tiles of the temple, and filling the dark spaces of the forest with a roaring, chaotic din. Kai lay awake on a thin straw mat in a small guest cell, his body instantly reverting to its ancient defensive armor. The sudden fury of the storm felt like an absolute emergency. The loud, unpredictable slamming of the rain against the wooden shutters caused his heart to hammer against his ribs, and that familiar, low-grade buzzing sensation flared up behind his temples with a terrifying intensity. His stomach twisted into a cold, tight ball of panic. He found himself mentally replaying the fragility of his home below, worrying about his stored silk bales, and fiercely rehearsing 100 different financial catastrophes that might occur if the floods washed out the lower bridges. He wanted to scream at the storm to stop. He wanted to run outside and physically hold the wooden shutters closed. His whole nervous system was humming at that high, brittle, breaking pitch, treating the natural movement of the weather as a personal assault that he was obligated to fight. Unable to endure the suffocating pressure in his chest, Kai slipped out of his cell and walked blindly into the open, covered veranda that wrapped around the central monastery garden. The rain was deafening, a vast wall of white water cascading from the eaves into the black soil below. Standing in the freezing dark, his teeth chattering and his hands clenched into tight fists within his sleeves, Kai noticed a tiny flickering glow at the far end of the stone walkway. It was a small oil lantern carried by Sister Aki, an elderly gardener who had spent 40 years tending the temple grounds. Her face was lined with deep, peaceful creases, and her grey robes were damp from the spray, yet her posture held a remarkable, grounded weightlessness. She was standing perfectly still beside the edge of the veranda, her eyes fixed on a specific spot in the flooded moss garden. Without speaking, Sister Aki stepped closer to Kai, inviting him with a soft tilt of her chin to look where she was looking. In the dim amber light of her lantern, Kai saw a heavy, hollowed-out bamboo water pipe, a shishio-doshi, resting on a wooden pivot over a mossy stone basin. As the torrential rain poured down, a massive stream of water from an overhanging bamboo gutter was emptying directly into the open top of the hollow pipe. The mechanism was entirely exposed to the fury of the storm. Because the rain was so fierce, the bamboo pipe filled up with terrifying speed, its green wooden body shaking under the immense sudden weight of the water. Kai watched with a tight throat, expecting the fragile bamboo to split down the center under the crushing pressure of the deluge. He felt a desperate urge to reach out his hand, to block the stream, or to build a tiny shelter over the wood to protect it from the strain. In a moment, this story will show us something even quieter about the hidden strength of a spirit that refuses to harden against reality. But Sister Aki remained perfectly motionless, her breathing slow, deep, and steady against the roar of the downpour. "Look closely at the wood, Kai," she whispered, her voice a low, soothing hum that seemed to slip right underneath the noise of the storm. Kai leaned forward. The hollow bamboo pipe had reached its absolute capacity. It was completely waterlogged, tilting dangerously on its iron pivot, heavy with a weight it could not possibly sustain. Yet, instead of resisting the load, and instead of splitting or hardening its fibers to fight the current, the bamboo did a remarkably simple thing. It yielded completely. It allowed the heavy water to tilt its head all the way down toward the earth. With a smooth, unhurried motion, the pipe tipped forward, emptying its entire burden into the stone basin below in one clean, liberating splash. The moment the weight left its core, the hollow bamboo did not snap back with a violent breaking jerk. Because it was empty, light, and perfectly balanced, it simply floated effortlessly back up to its original center, its open mouth rising once more to face the sky, ready to receive the next drop without a single trace of resentment or memory. A second later, the heavy rain filled it again, and once more it bowed, emptied itself, and returned to the stillness of its center. It did not try to dry the garden. It did not complain that the storm was too long. It simply moved with the weight, remaining entire and unbroken, precisely because it refused to hold on to the burden. "You are still trying to be an iron wall," Kai's sister Aki said softly, turning her calm, wrinkled face toward the young man's rigid shoulders. "You think that by tightening your chest and freezing your thoughts against the storm, you are protecting your life. You treat every thunderclap and every uncertain tomorrow as a stone that you must hold inside your own bones. You believe that if you let your guard down for even one breath, the water will drown you. But look at the bamboo. It survives this midnight deluge not because it has a roof over its head, but because it has the courage to become empty. It allows the weight to enter. It bows to the reality of the rain. It lets the water go, and it returns home to its own balance. A deep, shuddering stillness fell over Kai's mind, a sensation of vastness that made the tight armor around his lungs loosen by a fraction of an inch. For the first time in his life, he saw his chronic hypervigilance not as a noble shield, but as a stubborn refusal to let reality move through him. He looked down at his own tightly clenched fists, and he chose to make one small, subtle shift in his awareness. He did not try to stop his anxious thoughts from rising, and he did not pretend that the storm was not terrifying. He did not judge himself for the cold panic vibrating in his stomach. Instead, he simply stood on the wooden veranda and allowed the noise to exist without making it his enemy. He breathed in the smell of the wet earth. He felt the icy spray of the rain against his skin, and he let those sensations wash over his mind like water sliding through the hollow channel of the bamboo. He stopped his intellect from leaping across the mountain to fix his workshop below. He returned his awareness completely to the single stone square beneath his own sandals. He allowed the night to be loud, recognizing that the weather belonged to the sky, not to him, and that his only true duty in this midnight downpour was to let the tension tilt forward and empty itself into the dark. The mountain storm did not magically clear because Kai found his softness. The rain continued to lash against the cedar timbers all through the long, freezing hours of the night. The road below remained flooded, and the future remained completely unmapped. But Kai was no longer a prisoner trapped in a vibrating wire. He sat down quietly on the stone walkway beside Sister Aki's lantern, his hands resting loose, warm, and open upon his knees, his posture flexible like a hollow reed that allows the gale to pass straight through its center without breaking the stem. He had stopped trying to conquer the midnight before he could rest. He allowed the uncertainty of tomorrow to drift through the air like mist, while his physical body remained firmly anchored to the deep, slow rhythm of his belly, waiting in the darkness for the natural coming of the dawn. When we observe the inner landscape of our own suffering, we begin to discover that this persistent, subconscious tightening is not a design flaw in your character. It is a deeply ingrained defense system constructed by a mind that has learned to treat vulnerability as a profound danger. At some point along your journey, you encountered moments where the world felt entirely too volatile to trust, where sudden transitions or unpredicted endings left you feeling exposed and unprotected. In response to that raw or painful instability, your intellect stepped forward as a tireless guardian. It began to spin endless webs of conceptual thought, trying to analyze every variable, replay every past mistake, and meticulously rehearse the future. We live under the exhausting illusion that if we can just keep our minds moving fast enough and our bodies wound tightly enough, we can somehow prevent life from hurting us again. But notice the hidden, devastating cost of maintaining this constant internal armor. Have you ever noticed that the more energy you spend trying to mentally secure your life, the more fragile and depleted you feel underneath? The mind constantly whispers that your hypervigilance is what keeps your world from collapsing into ruin. It tells you that if you just worry for another hour, or if you analyze a partner's subtle shift in tone just one more time, you will finally arrive at a place where you are safe enough to let your guard drop. We begin to use self-judgment and internal criticism as tools for self-improvement, believing that if we are harsh enough with our own flaws, we can force ourselves into a shape that can never be rejected, abandoned, or caught off guard. We try to punish our natural sensitivity out of existence, hoping that a harder, more rigid version of ourselves will finally be immune to the unpredictability of living. This is the exact psychological mechanism where our hidden pain begins to harden into a fixed identity. We no longer just experience a passing wave of fear, we begin to define ourselves as an anxious person. We no longer just carry a heavy pocket of unresolved grief. We look at our reflection through a distorted lens and believe that we are the brokenness itself. We turn our survival strategies into a permanent home, wrapping the stretched threads of our hyper-vigilance so tightly around our hearts that it completely changes the way we occupy our own skin. We become terrified of what would happen if we simply stopped the frantic rehearsal, unbolted the internal gates, and allowed our bodies to go soft. We confuse the constant, electrical buzzing behind our temples with the vital spark of life itself, forgetting that the armor we wear to protect our peace is the very thing that is suffocating our spirit from within. One of the great liberating insights of the Buddha was the clear, compassionate separation between the natural events of life and the immense suffering our own resistance adds to them. He illuminated the profound truth that our human experience is divided into two entirely different layers. The first layer consists of the basic, inescapable realities of being a soft, mortal creature in a vast and shifting universe, the reality that we will experience fatigue, that people we love will sometimes misunderstand us, that plans will unravel, and that the future will always remain completely unmapped. This is the first pain of living. It is like the heavy autumn downpour that moved through Sister Aki's monastery garden. It is a natural condition of existence, fluid, temporary, and entirely beyond our personal control. The second layer is what our own mind constructs around that natural rain. It is the invisible, rigid wall of internal resistance that screams this should not be happening. It is the desperate, exhausting demand that every person approve of us, that every relationship remain static, and that every environment remain perfectly safe before we are willing to relax our muscles. This second layer is what transforms a passing storm into a chronic, internal winter. We cannot always prevent the first pain, we cannot stop the rain from falling through the pine trees, and we cannot force our lives to look exactly like a predictable, comfortable path. But Buddhist wisdom reminds us that we possess the sacred capacity to stop feeding the second pain. We can learn to stop slamming the heavy wooden shutters shut against our own hearts. Slowly, the teaching becomes deeply personal. Think of how this exact mechanism is operating within the quiet space of your bedroom right now as you lie awake in the dark. The first layer of your experience may simply be the physical reality that your body is exhausted, but your mind is still vibrating with a restless current of thoughts. That is a neutral, passing condition of the present moment. But notice how quickly the second layer arrives: the mental calculations of how many hours remain before dawn, the fierce self-judgment for your inability to fall asleep, and the anxious rehearsal of how difficult tomorrow will be if you do not force your brain to become silent. Notice that the quiet darkness of the room is not what is causing your chest to tighten. It is your resistance to the wakefulness that is creating the hot friction behind your eyes. The suffering is not born from the night, it is born from your demand that the night look differently. True peace is not the absolute absence of difficulty, nor is it a magical static state where you will never encounter an anxious thought, a difficult transition, or a painful memory again. If you are waiting for your outer life to become completely smooth, or for your inner mind to become perfectly wall-free before you give yourself permission to rest, you will be waiting forever. Peace is not a destination at the end of a clear path. It is an entirely different relationship with the difficulty itself. It is the capacity to function like Sister Aki's hollow bamboo water pipe, to stand completely still in the middle of the deluge, fully exposed to the weight of reality, yet allowing that weight to tilt your head down, empty itself out, and return effortlessly to the quiet balance of your center without a single trace of fracture. What happens within your body when you stop treating every defensive thought as an absolute truth that must be obeyed? What happens when a wave of self-protection or worry arises in your chest, and instead of over-tightening the bone pegs of your loom to fight it, you simply look at it with a soft, spacious awareness? In that single moment of recognition, the rigid iron of your defense begins to warm. You are no longer the prisoner trapped inside the fortress of your own hyper-vigilance, and you are no longer the thread snapping under the strain of its own security. You become the vast, hollow space that allows the vibration to pass straight through your fibers without breaking the loom. You become the quiet observer of the fear, and because you are the space that holds the fear can no longer consume your identity. In a moment, this wisdom will come even closer to the specific choices and digital pressures you face when you open your eyes tomorrow morning. We will see how this ancient perspective of the relaxed thread and the tipping bamboo applies directly to the modern rhythms of your everyday life, to the messages that go unanswered, the fear of falling behind, and the moments where you feel deeply guilty for simply needing to rest. But as we prepare to bring this teaching home, remember that there is absolutely no breakthrough you need to force tonight. Let the sounds of these words wash over your mind like water sliding down polished stone, leaving your heart a little wider, a little softer, and completely permitted to release its guard as we continue. Now, let this ancient awareness of the relaxed loom thread and the yielding bamboo move quietly down into the specific rooms, digital screens, and unspoken pressures of your modern everyday life. The dark timber frame and the tipping water pipe are not mere symbols from a distant mountain sanctuary. They are the exact emotional forces moving within your body. When you check your phone in the early morning, and when you place it on the nightstand at the end of an exhausting day, we do not listen to these parables to escape our current world, but to learn how to walk through its hyper-connected demands without letting our spirits splinter under a perpetual, high-frequency strain. Think of how frequently you find yourself over-tightening the bone pegs of your internal frame during a normal afternoon. Perhaps it happens when you are waiting for a text message or an email that never seems to arrive. You send a message that exposes a small piece of your genuine heart, or you submit a project at work, and then the waiting begins. The minutes stretch out, and the silence from the other side begins to feel like a heavy, suffocating fog. Your mind instantly interprets this blank space as a profound emergency. To protect you from the pain of perceived rejection or failure, your intellect begins to spin catastrophic stories. It replays your past words, rereads the sent message a dozen times, and fiercely rehearses 100 different explanations for why they have not responded. You check your phone for reassurance every few minutes, demanding that a single digital notification act as an emergency key to unlock your lungs. But notice the internal paradox. The reassurance you seek from the outside cannot stabilize the stretched thread inside your temples. You are trying to force the distant world to become certain before you will give your own chest permission to expand. Maybe you recognize this rigid bracing when you are lying awake at midnight, feeling behind in your life, or comparing your quiet, messy reality to the polished, curated timelines of the people around you. A subtle, poisonous whisper tells you that you are not doing enough, that you have made too many mistakes, or that you must constantly fix your deficiencies before you are allowed to be happy. You want to close your eyes. Your bones are crying out for a moment of genuine surrender, but an anxious thought stands over your bed, like a harsh master, telling you that you have not earned the right to rest until you have mentally secured your entire career, your finances, and your relationships. You try to smile through the heaviness during the day, pretending to be perfectly fine while carrying a low-grade electrical buzz of panic beneath the surface. You want rest, but you feel deeply guilty for resting, as if your exhaustion is a failure and your stillness is a vulnerability you cannot afford. Buddhist wisdom reminds us of a beautiful, liberating truth that your tired heart needs to hear tonight. You can rest without earning it. Rest is not a luxury prize you receive after you have successfully organized the entire universe. It is the natural, spacious ground upon which your resilience is built. You do not have to be the permanent sentry for your life while you are trying to sleep. You can care deeply about your future, your work, and the people you love without gripping their outcomes so fiercely that your own green fibers begin to split from the strain. Tomorrow, when you step back into the noise of the daylight world, peace is practiced not by achieving a state of magical perfection, but in very small, poetic moments of everyday choice. When a wave of anxiety or an oncoming shadow of uncertainty hits your body, you do not have to immediately harden your muscles to fight it. You do not have to pretend to be okay, and you do not have to use self-blame to force yourself into a state of readiness. You can choose to do what Kai did on the monastery veranda. You can stop. You can take one slow, conscious breath before you answer a demanding email, before you check your phone for validation, or before you react to an unexpected disruption in your plans. A single unhurried breath before you react is a form of supreme spiritual wisdom. In that tiny pause, you are refusing to strike your own spirit with the second arrow. You are acknowledging the first pain, the reality that the text has not arrived, or that the project is difficult, or that the room is tense. But you are refusing to turn that difficulty into a verdict about your worth. You are allowing yourself to function like Sister Aki's dark slate lamp or the oiled bamboo, letting the water of the environment touch the outer edges of your day without allowing it to penetrate your core or drown your golden wick. You are remembering that not every anxious thought deserves your total obedience, and not every uncomfortable feeling is a command that you must follow. You can live through an unpredictable life, one single stone square at a time. If you do not know how a relationship will unfold, or if you feel a wave of fear about an upcoming transition, you do not have to exhaust your marrow trying to think your way through the cloud. The fog cannot paralyze you if you stop demanding that the trail reveal its ending before you are willing to walk. You only need to tend to the single patch of earth currently beneath your sandals. If you can be fully present with the warmth of your morning tea, or the physical sensation of your lungs moving behind your ribs, or the simple weight of your feet pressing against the floorboards, you already possess everything required to remain steady. You can care deeply without gripping tightly. Tonight, as you rest in the protective sanctuary of this room, realize that the day you left behind is entirely finished. The conversations have reached their natural conclusions, the screens have gone dark, the messages have taken their current shapes. There is absolutely nothing you can fix, rewrite, or secure between this hour and the dawn. The world is fully capable of continuing its long, slow turning without your constant, vigilant surveillance. You can let the bone pegs of your internal loom go completely slack, allowing the overstretched threads of your day to unwind into the dark earth. Your only calling in this moment is to let your shoulders drop, to let your breath become wide, and to permit your mind to drift effortlessly into the deep, unguided spaces of rest. In a moment, our journey will bring us to the final, stillest part of the night, where the parables and the practices dissolve completely into the quiet landscape of your sleep. You do not need to memorize these lessons, and you do not need to carry the weight of the mountain pass into your dreams. Just let your awareness become as soft and spacious as the night air, letting the demands of the day fade away like a harmless echo in the midnight forest as we prepare to close our eyes. The deep midnight forest outside has fallen into an absolute breathless silence, and the mountain rain has finally dissolved into a soft uniform mist that hangs motionless over the dark pine needles. Inside this room, the shadows are heavy and long, resting across the corners of your bed like soft wool blankets that have no shape and no weight. Let your physical body sink completely into the dense, dark support of the mattress beneath you, letting go of the very last effort required to hold yourself together. Your limbs are growing remarkably heavy now, taking on the calm, unbothered density of ancient timber that has rested in the earth for 100 winters. There is absolutely no movement left for you to make, no posture you need to maintain, and no defensive shield you are required to hold against the darkness. The world beyond your window has completely relinquished its demands, closing its eyes to the traffic of the day, and you are permitted to close your eyes too, letting your consciousness drift away from the shore of your thoughts, like a small wooden boat slipping into a calm, currentless bay. With each quiet breath that moves behind your ribs, notice how the internal frequency of your mind is beginning to alter, slowing down from that high electrical buzz into a deep, low, spacious resonance. Your exhalations are becoming long, soft, and completely unrestricted, like the slow sigh of the autumn wind moving through a valley of loose river reeds. You do not need to watch the breathing or evaluate its depth. Simply allow your lungs to expand and contract in their own private, quiet rhythm, a natural tide that knows exactly how to empty itself without your permission. The hot friction that was lingering behind your forehead all through the long afternoon is completely cooling down now, carried away by the cool night air that enters the room. Let your eyelids become immensely heavy, as if they were carved from smooth, dark slate stone, dropping shut over your eyes with a final, beautiful weight that no longer wishes to scan the horizon for danger. The master weaver's loom inside your chest is completely unstrung tonight. Think of those long, fine silk threads that were drawn so fiercely across your nervous system all day long, vibrating at that brittle, breaking pitch of hyper-vigilance. Every single white bone peg has been turned loose, spinning back until the wood clicks softly in the dark. The silk is entirely slack now. It no longer hums with tension. It no longer braces against an anticipated crisis, and it no longer holds a rigid, defensive shape out of fear of the future. The threads are resting in the deep shadow of the dark timber uprights, soft, loose, and completely unbothered, swaying slightly with the slow, natural rise and fall of your chest. The frame of your life has gone quiet. The strain of trying to outmaneuver every storm and secure every outcome has dissolved entirely into the open space of the night, leaving your spirit wide, flexible, and completely at peace with its own softness. You have permission to stop solving your life for tonight. The endless calculations, the mental rehearsals of tomorrow's tasks, the constant replaying of past mistakes, and the quiet anxiety of trying to control how others perceive you, all of them can be left on the threshold of this evening, resting like heavy, waterlogged garments that you no longer need to wear. There is absolutely nothing you can fix, rearrange, or protect between this quiet hour and the coming of the dawn. The universe is vast enough, dark enough, and solid enough to hold all of your unmapped transitions while you rest, without requiring you to stand guard over your own destiny. You do not have to earn your sleep by being perfectly prepared for the future before your head touches the pillow. You are a tired human being who has let the pegs go slack, allowing the day to unwind into nothingness without calling it a failure. A profound, weightless feeling of returning home is settling into the center of your heart. It is the deep realization that the peace you have been tracking so fiercely through the mountains of your overthinking was never a destination at the end of a clear path. It was always the natural, spacious ground that was quietly breathing beneath the armor you wore to protect it. You do not need to build an iron wall to be safe in the dark. Like the hollow bamboo water pipe in the monastery garden, you can let the weight of reality move through you, tilting your head to empty the burden when it becomes too heavy, and returning effortlessly to the silent balance of your own center. You are the vast space that holds the shadow, not the shadow itself. You are the quiet awareness that remains whole, untouched, and completely serene long after the storm has run out of rain. Let the words and the parables of the mountain weavers dissolve entirely now, fading away like a distant temple bell heard through a blanket of thick winter snow. You do not need to remember the paths. You do not need to analyze the insights, and you do not need to hold on to a single concept from this journey. Let your mind become as empty, as dark, and as beautifully non-reactive as the mossy stone basin beneath the trees. Your breathing is nothing more than a faint, rhythmic murmur in the dark, a gentle pulse of life that is slowly carrying you deeper into the unguided, infinite currents of sleep. The night is wide, the room is safe, and your spirit is completely unbraced, floating effortlessly into the deep sanctuary of your rest. And if the very vulnerability you have been fighting all your life was never a weakness to be cured, but the soft, flexible wood through which your true light was always meant to shine.